Hello viewers, welcome to StudyIQ. Today we are joined by Mr. Pratham Mittal. Pratham is the founder of the Neta App, which is an app to review politicians and make them accountable in our democracy. In the past, Pratham started a venture known as Outgrow, which is now one of the world's largest polling technology company with clients like the New York Times and Guardian. Pratham did his schooling from Doon School and finished his undergraduation in systems engineering and politics from the Wharton School at the University of Pennsylvania. He's also involved in higher education initiatives in India via different ventures. Pratham, welcome to the show.
Thank you so much.
Could you share some, some light on the Neta app and your inspiration behind starting the app?
Sure. So I think we're living in a networked world where most of the decisions that we take are informed by data, right? So all the way from deciding which restaurant to go to which cab to book, data informs it, and in both these cases, the rating that informs which restaurant you go to or which cab you take. And it just sort of dawned on us that perhaps we need a similar structure, a similar dynamic when it comes to politics as well. Why shouldn't our political decisions be as well informed as deciding the restaurant? So we thought that maybe something like this already exists. I mean, it has to, because it's such an obvious thing that all the politicians should be rated. And when we go on the day of the voting to cast our vote, we see which politician deserves our vote on the basis of a rating. But when we went to the market, we realized that there is nothing out there like this. And that's really what inspired us to create the Neta app. And we're really excited because India has embraced it. And we have almost 28 million users who every day are rating their politicians. So we're really excited to see where we can take this now moving forward.
Excellent. How do you verify the authenticity of the user? There are concerns regarding multiple users voting from the same number. How do you verify that, and how do you also verify the constituency from where the user is coming?
Yeah. So that's a great question, and the obvious one, right? Which is that what is the authenticity of the app? Are the ratings actually representative of what the people are thinking about a particular politician? And that's really important. So there are three things that we do to ensure that each user on the app is an authentic user, and his rating is also truly representative of what he or she thinks. So I'll answer the first question first. To ensure that people are voting from the right constituency, we check for three things. First is we check where have you logged into the app from, right? So let's say you claim to be voting from South Delhi, but you're sitting all the way in Kerala, right? So we know that your vote should not be counted, right? So we decrease the weightage given to your account or your vote. That's one. Another thing is we check for IP addresses, whether that IP address has been flagged as a fake user, right? And there are multiple publicly available databases where we can check and cross-check that from. And the third and the most important thing is that we actually send you an OTP, a one-time password, to make sure that you are actually the owner of the cell phone that you claim to be the owner of, right? And so that's the know your customer procedure that we follow to ensure that every user is authentic. That's number one. Number two is whether the app is truly able to gather the right sentiment of a user. For that, we ensure that in addition to giving the rating, which is out of 5, people have to substantiate that with a video review, right? So if I'm giving, let's say, the Prime Minister a 4 on 5 for his performance in education, I have to be able to substantiate that with a video of myself talking about why it is that I'm giving a 4 on 5, right? And once that validation is there, that 4.5 makes a lot more sense, right? So every rating is actually substantiated by this extra monologue that every user has to record, right? And there are many other algorithmic checks that we have in place. So for example, let's say a political party wants to influence the rating of the candidates, right? They will not be able to do that because if the app sees a lot of traffic coming in from one particular location, we know that we have to just shun that traffic, right? And that's happened in the past. It's a very funny story. I'll tell you maybe later in the interview. But a lot of parties try to game the system, right? They're intelligent, but we try to be one step ahead of them, but they catch up very quickly, and then we just have to keep moving and keep progressing.
Interesting. You have, of course, secured a lot of data, and you have around 28 million users. Uh, in case you have a policy regarding data privacy, and in case you share that data with a third party, what are the policies which govern the same?
Actually, it's a very simple answer, and I'm surprised by the lack of understanding out there. All of our data is publicly available. So when you go to the app, every data point that we collect is available to you to see for free. right? So we don't have to sell the data to anyone. You can't really sell publicly available data, right? Or you can't really share that because it's anyways available to everybody. So there is no data that is behind a paywall, behind a firewall, or behind any sort of wall, right? Whatever the users do on the app is user generated content, and it's available publicly, right? So data privacy actually doesn't even come into the picture. Only one sensitive issue is that when we ask for your phone number, right, we only ask for your phone number once to validate that you're a real person. After that, we don't store it, right? In fact, the number doesn't even touch our servers. We use third-party APIs where the number gets validated and goes away, and it's a government database that we use for that. So there is no data that's hidden, which is only available to certain parties or certain corporates or anything like that. So we are not in the business of selling data.
You have collected a lot of user base. How do you plan to, monetize that? Do you have a revenue model for your app? What are the fundraising strategies when you're looking at the long-term development of the app?
So very honestly, like there is no monetization strategy, right? Theoretically, there can be monetization strategies, but we have decided very consciously that we're not going to monetize the app, right? The vision and the mission of the app is so much greater than just money, right? If we are successful in our vision, in achieving our vision, then we have changed the way politics is played, right? And a few dollars here and there wouldn't make a difference, right? So we are happy to keep investing in building the app, in building the infrastructure, and building the user base, and making sure everyone has a good experience. Monetization, we'll come to it later. The reason we can delay monetization is because we are well funded and we are well supported by all the media organizations, right? So if we want to, let's say, get 100 million downloads of the app, we obviously have to rest on the shoulders of the media. And because the media actually borrows a lot of data from us, we are able to do this quid pro quo agreement of sorts, where they give us free advertising in exchange for free data, right? So those are the sort of systems we have that are currently sustaining us. Eventually, we might have to monetize to be sustainable, but we haven't reached that point just yet. Right now, the sole purpose is to develop trust and credibility of our data. Everything else is secondary.
It's such a large database. Again, there are genuine concerns regarding interference by political stakeholders and pulls and pressures of the game. What are your mitigation strategies to ensure that the data is secured and there's no interference by government and political stakeholders?
So there are two ways a government can arm twist, or not government, but any political entity or stakeholder can arm twist, right? First is by trying to game the data, right? And as I explained in the authenticity question, using algorithmic techniques, we are able to mitigate that to quite an extent, right? So if let's say people are trying to vote from the same location, on the same phone, or from the same IP address, we are able to completely identify that and disregard those votes. So that's one. The second is whether someone gives me a call and says, Pratham, like you change the data, or like you'll be put behind bars, or you'll be like, I don't know, like, lots of things. There, we don't really have any political affiliations, right? And to be honest, we haven't become that big yet, where political forces start thinking of us as adversaries yet. When that happens, I'm looking forward to that day, because at that time we would have definitely made some impact, but we haven't reached that stage yet. And I think politicians in India are very mature. The way they have embraced social media, I hope they will embrace this platform as well. And rather than looking at this platform as a threat, they look at us as a way to get and generate feedback, right? Because the platform is able to tell them, the app is able to tell them exactly what it is that they're popular for, and what is it that they're unpopular for, right? And that data and that intelligence can go a long way in helping them build a better strategy for their elections.
Regarding your fundraising strategy, I'm citing a report from Venture VC Circle, where there was a report regarding a 10 million US deal at full equity with few media companies. Could you share some light?
Sure. So what we tried back in the day was to raise some money, and we realized that we don't really need money. What we need is support of the media organizations, right? So we struck some partnerships. I wouldn't call them equity partnerships. I wouldn't call them any of those. We struck some partnerships whereby, we took their help in getting the word out to the market that this app exists. And in exchange, we provided them with data from the app that they could then use for their pre-poll shows or their exit poll shows or their survey-based shows. So yeah, I wouldn't really call them equity partnerships. I think they're more just generic partnerships where two parties are working in a symbiotic relationship.
You spent some time in China during your university days, trying to understand their startup ecosystem. If you do a comparative analysis, where do you think India stand vis-a-vis China, and how long before we catch up with them?
I think you can't compare. I think it's like comparing apples and oranges, right? The ecosystem in China is very recluse. Let me explain what I mean by that. China is a huge market in of itself, right? And the penetration rates for internet and for cell phones is very high, right? So when you launch a company in China, you're happy if you do well in China, right? Whereas when you launch a company in India, because of the English language dividend that we have, we can look at the entire world, right? So for example, Oyo, which is an Indian company, now dominates the hotel market in China, right? But can we say the same for a Chinese company in India? Right? We cannot yet. To an extent, TikTok, but that's social media, and I think that's 1 in a million.
Even Alibaba has caught up.
Yeah, Alibaba hasn't caught up, and even if they have, it's through acquisition or through investment,
Correct.
right? So I think the Chinese companies are recluse and they're focused on China, which is right for them. And Indian companies, of course, India is a big market as well, but they have the flexibility and the freedom to look beyond India as well, right? So that's one critical difference. To answer your question, how much time will it take for us to catch up? I think in some ways we are ahead, right? I think if you talk about social media messaging, we are probably way further behind because China has WeChat, which is an ecosystem in of itself, running parallelly against like a WhatsApp, Facebook, behemoth. But in India, what we see at the grassroots, so if you go to the villages in India and the kind of services that the government is able to provide through cell phones, I think that's actually quite eye-opening, and even I think Chinese have something to learn from us. They're such different people, they're such different ecosystems. I doubt we can compare the two. If you were to compare India, you'll be doing a disservice comparing it with China. You can probably compare it to, let's say, like a Thailand, right, or a Brazil, right? I think those are more comparable.
A good startup ecosystem would require a skill-based education. You are involved in higher education reforms in India, via various ventures. Your thoughts on how we can improve the higher education system in India?
See, here's a story, right? I'll ask you a question. Which discipline or department in a university do you think sees the best outcomes for students in terms of jobs?
It's primarily STEM-based.
No, you're wrong. Think again.
Liberal arts also.
No, not at all. You'll be surprised with the answer. It's medicine, right? Every student who comes out of a medicine school gets a job that's commensurate to his level. It's not true for STEM. Engineers in India are very popular for not getting good jobs, right? So it's medicine. And the reason medicine graduates do so well is because medicine students or the medical college, exactly, the medical college is situated inside a medical hospital, right? So you're immersed in the industry from day one. That is not true for any other discipline. Engineering, business, most universities are far away from engineering centers or business centers of the manufacturers, right? So how can you expect students to do well if they've never even seen the industry, which is not the case in medicine? So I think every discipline in India or anywhere across the world should take inspiration from the way medicine is taught, right? So my sense is that a business school should be situated inside a business district, right? You can house 200 business schools in the middle of Gurgaon, right? Or in the middle of Bangalore, right? Or you could house like a MTech or a mechanical engineering school in the middle of a Maruti factory. I think that's much better education than setting up a university 500 kilometers away from the city. So I think that's skill-based learning, right? Can we make all our universities immersive in the industry? And if we can do that, then we have solved the problem of employment, of quality, of even the entrepreneurship zeal, etc.
Talking about the management of Neta App, who are your key, management, what's your management strategy? And also, who are the key competitors, in this particular circuit?
So I mean, we have a very small team. I think we are only 20, 25 people. And the average age of the team is probably 26 years old, right? And we went to all the universities and colleges in India, and we wanted students who are not who are politically active, but who are discerning in the way they form opinions, right? So we didn't want anyone who's either far left or far right. We don't want anyone who are super opinionated in the team. So we made sure that all of the team members value data more than anything else. So the hiring strategy has just been to bring people on board who value data and who can think from a data perspective. So all decisions are data driven. So that's number one. Number two, young people, because there's a lot of running around we have to do. So we have to go from state to state, election to election. So right now, we are lucky that the elections are happening in Delhi as we do this, so that everyone's here. But last month, we were all in Jharkhand, where the elections are happening in Jharkhand. And before that, we were in, we were traveling around the country for the national general elections. And I think we covered maybe like 600 villages, 20, 25 cities, right? And so you need someone who's young and especially not married. I think that's really important.
The bandwagon.
So that's been the team, and we try to, because we don't make money, right? We have to be very innovative about how we spend money, right? So we try to do as many quid pro quo deals with partners, right? All the way from media companies who help us advertise to vendors who help us develop the app, or people who help us with the creatives for our on-ground promotions, and even the government. So, for example, when we go to villages, we actually leverage the post offices there for a lot of the work that we do. We leverage the government rest houses for a lot of the work we do. So we don't, incur all of those corporate costs that might come in. So that's the high level man. In terms of competitors, see, I shouldn't say that we have no competitors, right? But I will say that we have no one in the market who's trying to tackle the accountability problem the way we are, right? That said, we are competing for the viewers and the users' time with every other app out there, right? If you open your phone, I'm sure there are 50 apps on your phone, right? And if you have the Neta app, I'm sure that's one of the 50 apps, right? So I'm competing with all the other apps, right? You would rather go on Facebook or Instagram and WhatsApp and all of those things than come on the Neta app. So I'm competing with them as well for your time. So the way we think about competition is who are we competing with for your time, right? Not just who's doing the same thing that we are doing. So that's how the team also thinks about. So we have to make our app, stand out. We have to make sure that it adds value. We have to make sure it's engaging, and we make sure it's relevant every day. So one of the things that we do to make it relevant every day is we have these surveys that we push every day, right? So for example, last 1 week, the topic of JNU has been sort of burning up, right? So we did a lot of surveys across the 28 million users that we have. And we came up with some very interesting results that might not be easily predictable. So for example, what we found is that people in West Bengal, right, who are Muslims between the age of 35 and 40, actually have no problem with the NRC, right? And no one would, in their correct mind, would think that's the case, right? But that's a data point that we have, very well supported with a huge sample size, right? So there's something to be said about that data. Correct. Right? And so we're able to generate these insights that might not be very obvious to people, right? Just by virtue of the size of the user data set that we have. So we are able to drive very interesting conclusions.
You've been involved in, in a lot of data that you have. What's been your accuracy in terms of
predicting elections? See, because we have this data, right? We try to help media companies come up with exit poll numbers, right? and it's an incredibly hard thing to do. So to be very honest, sometimes you get it right, sometimes you don't. So for example, state elections we usually get right, because it's a very focused data set. We can focus all our energies, and we have a good sample size. When we go national, we actually were not very accurate, right? And there we were not accurate because we spread our user base too far and thin, right? So for example, we were really wrong in West Bengal, right? We thought that TMC would do really well. They did not do as well. So we got 10 seats wrong there. We got 20 seats wrong in Uttar Pradesh because we didn't have enough of a user base from the Purvanchal area, right? We got Gujarat really wrong because we didn't have a lot of a user base from the Kutchi area, right? So when we are looking at the national level elections, the prediction becomes hard to get right. But in states, we usually get it right.
And in the future, do you plan to even give a lot of emphasis to municipal elections, Zilla Panchayat elections, tier 3 of the government?
Definitely. So I'll give you a very interesting statistic. The turnout rate for local elections in some states is higher than for general elections, right?
Local issues matter more.
Local issues matter more. So it's
Stakeholders are directly accountable.
right. So it's completely it's not even something you have to think about. It's just a matter of bandwidth, right? We are, again, as I said, 25 people. Collecting that data and making sure that those elections are run properly on the app is slightly hard. So, but I think hopefully by the end of this year we'll be able to do our first municipal elections.
If you can just quickly run through the main features of the app,
Yeah.
and in the future, if just to improve user engagement, what are the additional features you will plan to introduce to the app?
So the first and the most core of the app is the ratings, right? So you can leave a rating and you can see the aggregate ratings of all the users, right? That's a central feature. And within that, there are many sub features which you can, the users and your viewers can probably discover by downloading the app. That's number one. Number two is political engagement, right? The app shows the background information for all the politicians of the country, right? What are their assets? What are their liabilities? What are their number of their criminal cases, their entire history, their education, all of those things, and validated. So the users, before they go cast their vote, they can actually see who they're voting for, right? In many cases, we have videos from these politicians talking about issues, etc., that further help select the right candidate. Then the third thing further delves into political engagement around for example, so let's say a political party wants to fundraise, right? So on the app, political parties can actually run fundraising campaigns as well, right? So far, I think 6 or 7 political parties have signed up to fundraise, and they've fundraised, I think on average 3 to 4 lakh rupees per constituency, which is sizable. So this, at the end of the day, the vision becomes that this becomes a one-stop political engagement tool or platform, right? From news to reviews to ratings to insights to
Fundraising and donating to.
Yeah, because think about this, right? There are thousands of political parties, and I don't think any of the political parties have a good website. So if you want to donate to a political party, you have to go to their office and donate, right? Do you know where the political parties' offices are? Nobody knows that.
Even if the treasurer is sitting there.
Sitting there, you wouldn't know, right? And when you give the money, are you confident that the money is actually being used? Or is it going into someone's pocket, right? So when you go through the app, there's a system in place, and it's a completely transparent system. So we submit that report directly to the Election Commission as well, right? So this will also become a very transparent and validated way of giving money to political parties.
Interesting. India has a very opaque system of political funding. We recently had the electoral bonds, which is, of course, making a lot of news. In the West, you have organized PACs and structures. Where do you think, in the future, where we are heading?
See, I think there's so many variables here. I'm no one to comment, and there's just so many variables. I think the system will mature in 2 ways. One is, I think technology will play a big role, right? That if all the funding is happening through a credit card or through online means or through net banking, etc., I don't think we even need electoral bonds, etc. Then I think that'll be enough to solve the problem. And the second is the practices will mature. I think the people who are giving money will realize that giving it through the system makes way more sense and makes it defensible than giving in cash, you know. So I think both those things, as they mature, the policy and the technology will eventually catch up. Yeah.
Thank you, Pratham, for joining us. It was interesting to hear your insights, regarding the Neta app and also about higher education reforms. Thank you, viewers, for joining us. Till next time.